Something people really like to do is choose things. But you know what I like to choose? Not choosing things. You wouldn't go potty and then go poop-a-doop, would you? Two things at once, you time-saving renegade. And why stop there? Play some games while you're at it. I'm telling you, picking more than just one thing is the way to live. So get on board with me and refuse to choose. And the first item of business on our agenda is going to be the NES and the Sega Master System. Yeah, maybe choosing two things doesn't necessarily mean at the same time. A recent goal of mine has been to talk about the Sega Master System more often. What can I say? With how many consoles there are, there's always going to be something else I could be giving more attention to that people are hounding me for in the comments. What with my nanners and all, I won't even mention all the nasty messages from the pro-strawberry people I get. That said, as much as I feel like the Sega Master System and NES make for a nice pair of 8-bit gaming goodness, which shouldn't be too much of a surprise given my opinion that the Genesis and Super Nintendo complement each other well, that doesn't mean they can't be compared. The first thing I'd like to talk about with the Sega Master System is how easy it is to get into it. To play an NES, you need an NES, at least if we're talking about first-party hardware from back in the day. But for Master System, one of the most popular methods of playing it, a bit of a dirty dog method, and the route I went, is to get what's called the Power Base Converter, which, if you have a Sega Genesis, as many retro gamers do, you're probably already used to attaching all sorts of extra stuff to it. And here's one more thing that can latch on. Why does this always get left out of people's towers of powers? Dang, the Master System really is underappreciated. However, unlike other stuff you can attach to the Genesis, the Power Base Converter doesn't require any additional cables or power supplies. I know, just when you thought there was a way for your tower of power to require 4 power bricks. But nope, you just pop this sucker on and off you go, utilizing the Genesis hardware that already has everything Master System games need to run properly, making for an authentic experience. And backwards compatibility. For my setup, I use RGB converted to component, what many consider to be a step above composite, though there is a bit of debate around that. In any case, the NES does not support RGB by default. You need to have it modded, which I did just to keep the playing field level for this video. I also ignored all my responsibilities for a month so I could play it more to prepare. I do it because I care about all of you. So all the NES footage you're seeing in this video uses RGB, and same with the Master System games. Okay, before we go much further, we gotta address the hippopotamus in the room. The NES received far more support from third-party developers than the Master System did. Remember, Nintendo had a stranglehold on the market at the time due to varying degrees of dirty dog business depending who you ask. For a lot of people, especially in the US, in their minds, the NES basically was the entire 8-bit generation. In fact, even a lot of the most die-hard Master System fans will tell you that even if they prefer the Master System hardware itself, the NES still had a better library of games. And, of course, because I said that, the rule is that I will now receive comments saying the opposite. Nobody owns a floppy-eared dog that can fly around like Dumbo. Hey, it was worth a try. It's worked for other things. But let's be honest, even if you felt like the NES provided a sufficient 8-bit experience, we retro gamers don't always stop at what we simply need, now do we? Hey, they've got regional differences, and this is one of my favorites. If you're somebody who has dove deep into the NES library, I think a very natural next place to go is the Master System. There weren't any games for the NES developed by Sega, so if you're looking for 8-bit Sega games, this is where you'll find them. One of the first places my brain always goes when it comes to easy to recommend Master System games is the Disney games. That's right, it wasn't just Capcom making awesome 8-bit Disney games. Sega was making them for their own platform as well, and most of them are a blast. I've had a lot of fun with them, and find myself popping these games in by default when I go to play Master System. Have you ever had a day that sucked? I'll answer that for you, yes. In which case, I recommend playing these games to make you feel better. Even Castle of Illusion here. You might be thinking, why would I play this over the Genesis version? And the answer is because it's better. At least, I think so. And from the digging around in forums I did, there are lots of other people who also think so. It's not just a stripped down version. It has similar elements, sure, but it really is its own game. As far as visuals go, the Genesis version definitely looks nicer, but perhaps to a fault? In Genesis games, usually your character moves around pretty quickly, but look at the jolly little stroll Mickey does here, showing off the level of animation the Genesis could do as an early game for the console. The jumping is what's really slow though, but then you look at the Master System version and hot doggity, it just feels a lot snappier to play. Not that I don't enjoy the Genesis game, it's just that I enjoy the Master System version a little more. Genesis, Master System, Genesis, Master System. And then there's Land of Illusion, which is probably even better. But while Disney games are represented well on both the Master System as well as NES, each offering unique games built special for the systems, the games based on the arcade is where things really differ. While the NES would often have games based on arcade titles, but essentially make brand new games, and oftentimes being considered better games as a result, the Master System often tried to more closely replicate the arcade experience, which, don't get me wrong, these ports still have some charm and unique personality of their own compared to the arcade originals. But nowadays, it's a lot easier to play more accurate ports of the arcade originals elsewhere, and I personally would have liked to see more of what the NES did with games like Ninja Gaiden for the Sega Master System. This is what I'm talking about. Just to use the Master System's excellent 8-bit hardware to make a unique game for it. Reminds me of one of my other favorites for the system. Both Ninja Gaiden for Master System and the NES are different from the arcade game, and, of course, different from each other as well. The NES version is far more well known, certainly in the US, but the Master System game is really cool too, especially since for a lot of people, it has that I didn't know this existed magic going for it. Kinda like sleeping in late. It plays a little differently, but it's still a ton of fun, and while it came out years after the NES version, the game does a great job of showing what games could look and play like on the hardware, which the Master System is generally agreed upon as the more powerful of the two. Imagine how cool it would have been if there were unique versions for the Master System of games like Contra, Mega Man, or Castlevania. We did kinda get a version of Castlevania for the Master System called Master of Darkness, a game clearly inspired by Castlevania, and so naturally I was all over it. It's good and certainly worth checking out if you're a Castlevania fan. If you're looking for other exclusives, games like Golden Axe Warrior, a Zelda-like game, and Phantasy Star, an RPG, are games often brought up, but there are still plenty of other choices, and one of my favorites is Kinsidon. I tell you what, the challenge of NES games is present in a lot of these games, as evidenced by me getting smacked around on this first stage here. Could have sworn I was better at this game before. I appreciate it though, leaves a lot of room for improvement. But now let's take a look at the controllers. In many ways, they are very similar. Little rectangles with 2 buttons on the right, a D-pad on the left, wait a second, what is this? Definitely not as good, but luckily you can just use a Genesis controller instead. With a few exceptions, it's compatible with most Master System games. There's also no buttons in the middle of the Master System controller, most notably a dedicated start button. A staple of most controllers, and rumor has it there are gamers out there who have never made it past the opening screen of a Master System game as a result. Which is a shame because it says start on the 1 button, and most games you can just start with the 2 button as well. However, perhaps more than starting a game, what really boils gamers' vegetables is not being able to pause a game via the start button, with the pause button being located on the system or power base converter itself. What I'd like to know is what kind of loser doesn't play games with their consoles in their lap. If only they'd put more of a controller's buttons on the console itself. Try to tell me this wouldn't be ideal. Also, for as much as the corners of the Master System controller look like the NES controller, it doesn't get criticized as much for feeling sharp. So, what is it about the NES controller that... Oh, I see. Nintendo with their quirky design choices. So there you have it. While I can't make the argument that the Master System is better than the NES overall, I can make the argument that's the wrong question to be asking. Instead, you should be asking, if I like the NES, would I also like the Master System? And to that, the answer is probably yes, you will. Goodness knows many of us have explored the NES's library with its vast catalog of quality games already, and with that in mind, I recommend the Master System as a fun additional avenue to pursue. And if you don't want to collect the games, many of which I ended up ordering from outside the US due to it being more popular in other parts of the world, well, let's just say it's easy to play these games on a Raspberry Pi, computer, or whatever you got. Also, before I go, I need to mention that certain Master System games used an additional FM chip for sound that was present in the Japanese version of the console, and which can be utilized in various ways on a US console, with perhaps the easiest way being these specialized power base converters. People love bringing this up, so I figured I would as well. So there you have it, my first video on the Master System, but certainly not the last. I'd be curious to hear not just from fans of the Master System, but also from the skeptics. What have been your reservations in getting into the system, and did anything I covered in this video sway you one way or another? Perhaps it's just one more console and you're already feeling maxed out. I hear ya. It seems like there's always one more console trying to get your attention. I remember years and years ago, the Sega Saturn would not stop calling me, and I was getting the weirdest voicemails. But with that, leave your comments below, and I will see ya in the next video.
He's the